Hey everybody, Bonehead from the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to Print to Pitch. This is our series where we have a look at everything 3D printed for Blood Bowl. From teams, to pitches, to star players, to cool accessory packs, and of course, stuff that has nothing to do with Blood Bowl, but works really well in Blood Bowl. Now, you guys will have heard of MGPix, the mastermind behind the Westcross Abbey set, the Undead team that came with it as well, and of course the dungeon lab that we recently used to build an entire dungeon of, but has just randomly released a mercenary pack with 6 different races of player with 6 different chainsaws and a random halfling referee. So they released today, and I thought, you know what, let's chuck them on the printer and have a look. Okay, so the Chainsaw Mercenaries gang is available on MyMiniFactory from MGPix, and if we give it a quick click, you can see here we've got a human with a chainsaw, a dwarf with a chainsaw, a werewolf with a chainsaw, a saurus, or lizardman with a chainsaw, a halfling with a chain knife and fork, which is pretty sweet, and you've got the undead chainsaw we've seen before and the halfling referee there as well, and we've got some actually printed and painted pictures there by the designer himself, by MGPix, so you can see kind of the aesthetic that the models were going for. This is really lovely. There's some really nice bit of glazing and ink, maybe there's some oils on the go, I don't know. Looks better than a bit of Agrax anyway. So you've got some printed and painted examples there as well, which is really cool. So $10 for 7 models. They do all come pre-supported as well. Let's have a look at the STLs. Okay, so the first 3 of the pack that we're going to look at today are the Lizardman with chainsaw, the human with chainsaw, and the werewolf with chainsaw. Now, this is just cool. This is just a fun pack, and it's available on MyMiniFactory. And actually, I should probably start there, shouldn't I? Yes, I should. But I'll tell you what, I won't. Okay, so the 3 players we're going to look at first is the Lizardman with chainsaw, the human with chainsaw, and the werewolf with chainsaw. Now, these are just fantastic models with really different design aesthetics. So first of all, let's start with the Lizardman, because he is entirely jumping. He has let go of the chainsaw, it is wrapped around his chest, we've got a flat spot of the tail and of the chainsaw that's in the ground, and he is just jumping with joy at this point. Now, we've not seen a Lizardman team from MGPix, so if this is the kind of style that they'd be planning on going with, I think that would be very cool. So you've got all the dents in the armor, you've got dents and dinks, you've got some nice bit of, some really nice texture on the lizard face and kind of the lizard scales and stuff, which is always useful. I'm a big fan of that because that helps with painting. It means you'll take contrast or Agrax really well. And as we spin around, you can see you've got a nice bit of like cloth texture as well as armor plates, so plenty to paint on this model. Then you've got this really cool human barbarian. Now, we'll come to the printing file in a second and how that actually the supported version is less of a human, more of an ogre, but that's fine. I love this design aesthetic. This looks just like the Dark Oath Chieftain from Games Workshop, except the dude has a chainsaw. So you've got the kind of Chaos Marauder fur, the Chaos Marauder helmet, you've got the Chaos Skull as a vambrace there as well, you've got a spiked boot, you've got a ton of appropriately chaosy details, and then the dude's just chilling out with a chainsaw, which I think is fantastic. And then you've got the werewolf, which is really cool too. So big fan of werewolves, especially in MGPix's world. We wanted them to make sure that the teams could be expanded to run to run necromantic, and this is your typical MGPix cartoony style. Like, the whole thing here is cartoony, and I love it. So this guy has got an undead chainsaw, so you've got some bone bits there, you've got wooden planks, and it's just an awesome player. This is a werewolf with a chainsaw. You've got all the appropriate fur, you've got good structure from the model, and it's just a whole heap of fun. Then we move on to the second part of the pack, which is the undead skeleton chainsaw, dwarf chainsaw, a halfling chainsaw, and the halfling referee as well. So another fun bunch here. Now, we've seen this undead chainsaw before. It was, I don't know if it was released as part of the Kickstarter, as part of the undead team, I'm not sure. All I know is that Trips has had this model printed for a while, and I thought it was really cool, and now you can get your hands on it as part of this pack. So this fits in really nicely with the West Cross Abbey undead team. It's the same kind of style. You've got bits of... It's just clumped together. The undead stuff is just clumped together. Everything's chipped and nicked, and you've got damage everywhere, and it just makes a lot of sense. Then you move on to a different style. Now, this is the dwarf player. Do they have names? Don't know if they have names. Dick Cheney is his name. And actually, you've got a completely different style. It's dwarven, right? It's round. It's master crafted. He's got a very cool helmet there as well. So actually, if we're going to see a dwarf team from MGPix with this kind of aesthetic, it looks kind of like the Iron Man 1 suit, which is pretty sweet. Now, great detail on the face, great detail on the beard. You've got all the like the plaiting of the beard and the extra pieces there as well. And the chainsaw is very cool. It is a similar design, which is really interesting, to the Undead Guy's chainsaw. Like, you've got like the big round rotary blade, but this is, you know, desolate and abandoned on the undead version, and you've got reasonably well maintained. Although it looks a bit dinked and dented, you can see some dents on there, which is pretty good. I like that. That's extra detail for sculpting. So cool model there as well. And then you've got the chainsaw of the halfling. So the halfling looks like he's actually smoking a cigar. You can't quite see the face because actually it's a small model. He's wearing a colander on his head. But the chainsaw for the halfling, you've got the pipe underneath, and it's just 2 forks and an automatic knife. Like, absolutely brilliant piece of design. Now, that is a very wide chainsaw, so whether or not it would work or not, I don't know. But these are all designed so that you can build a mercenary using Death Zone 2020 rules, or you can just use them as, you know, if you're taking a chainsaw star player, you can just run this guy and be like, here you go, this is my Helmut Wulf, and I'm representing him with this model because it makes sense, because it fits the theme of my team. And then you've got this great little referee model that looks a lot like Rob from North Wales Carnage Cup, which is really interesting. And but anyway, you can't go wrong with a referee model. So 4 more models there, which are all very independent. Some good style. Here we go. You got a nice little... I'm actually most impressed, I think, with this dwarf. You got a really detailed bit of dwarf brooch there as well. Very cool. Okay, so all of these models do come pre-supported, and when it came to me printing them off, I grabbed one of each of the pre-supports, chucked them on the plate, and sliced them and printed them. What I didn't do at that point was check the scaling was right. I just kind of chucked them on and was like, ah, cool, okay, let's go. So this is the human with a chainsaw, and then this is the human with a chainsaw supported. And it's a bit of an interesting and stark difference in that the supported model is probably double the scale. In fact, that's what we'll do right now. We will do a bit of a test to see. So 50% is too small. Maybe it's 75%. 75% looks about right. Anyway, what I ended up doing was printing this giant dude who has come out very big. Which is really cool. So when I took him off the plate, I was like, oh, sweet, we've got an ogre, like a chaos ogre with a chainsaw. That's pretty cool. So the models I've printed are in slightly different scales. So what I would say is, and I'll ping him a message and just sort of say, hey, your pre-supports are very different from your primary models, but check the scale and potentially support them yourself for the time being. Everyone I've printed has been one of the pre-supports, and everyone I've printed has worked beautifully. So pre-supports are great. The scale may not be what you're looking for though, so a very big watch out for that. Well, as we've already shown off our gigantic human with a chainsaw, I figured it was a great place to start. So this has all been printed on my Mars 2 Pro, standard settings, standard resin, standard everything really. I love the design of this model, and it is so good. You can see all the detail. Now, as you'll know, it's a little bit bigger scale than you would expect for a human. Oh, and I've done a bad job cleaning it up. Bad, Ben. Oh, no. Ugh. Oh, that's going to be a pain to clear up. Anyway, that's not a problem. That's my fault, not the model's fault. But you can see you've got all the detail there, and it actually comes out really crisp. Now, scale-wise, we always like to go through the scale of these models when you print them off at 100%. And I'm kind of glad I did that, because this dude is massive, and I love it. This guy is like a half giant with a chainsaw, and I don't think that I think there could be a better type of player. Now, if this was scaled down, and I think we looked at 75%, didn't we, through the STL, then actually probably would be a bit bigger than a human. But when it comes to a chainsaw player or star player or a mercenary, they're okay being bigger than a regular dude. They've got more presence, they've got more potency. But as this comes pre-supported on a somewhat larger scale, I figured we'd grab a larger model to compare it to, and as you can see, he's head and shoulders above an ogre. But the good thing is, because of the kind of the design here, it will fit on a 32mm base. So I'm going to have a great time basing this guy and just using him as an absolutely massive chainsaw. I love the design. I will print him again at normal human size. But if we can get a Chaos Marauder team in this, like this style from MGPix, I will be ecstatic. And another model that came out a little bit larger than I'd expected. That's not fair. When I chucked him on the plate, I was like, a Croxagore with a chainsaw? This is outrageous. It is a little bit outrageous. But anyway, this is the Lizardman version of the Chainsaw Boy. I like the style of the chainsaw. It's really sci-fi, but also looks like it's come off a bike. It's a really interesting mix. Now, this is the pre-supported version, so we'll have a look at the scaling in a second, but you can see all the detail we looked at with like the lizard skin and the nicks on the armor and everything. It's a really lovely sculpt. I don't understand why he's jumping in the air, but I love the image of it. I love the dynamism of it. I just think it's such a fun model, and I just love it. Now, this one is a little bit on the large side as well. So I think, again, it needs to be scaled down. But if you're scaling down to 75% to get you kind of in line, I wouldn't use the pre-support. It risks making the supports too thin. So I would scale it down probably to about 75% and then print with your own supports. And that will bring you to probably around about Saurus size. If we line them up to the human, you can see that they're both kind of exaggerated sizes. So 75% is probably where I'd want to be for that, and then you'll end up looking like probably about the same size as the ogre. But when it comes to a mercenary Saurus, I think it's okay. Now, I guess one other thing to ping out here is that with the exception of the kind of rope around his neck that's attached to the chainsaw, strap, that's the one. There's not a lot of thin bits on this model, so when you scale him down, it's gonna be okay. Normally, if you scale down a resin, a 3D printed model, you have to be very careful of thin pieces because they can become very brittle and become a bit rubbish. Because this is built in a sort of chunky way, this is going to survive scaling down and reprinting really, really nicely. However, again, I'm going to say it, I think it's a wicked model. We've got a Croxagore here with a chainsaw. And on to the werewolf. This one is of a reasonable scale, and I think the rest of the models are printed at where we want them to be. And this, I absolutely love. Like, this is a really cool positional. Like, he's in a really good pose. He's in that kind of crouching hero pose. You've got this absolutely massive chainsaw on the back, and you can see, oh, there's a little bit of support I've missed off there. Now, this is pre-supported, and this is of a scale where I would say you're good to go. There is a little bit of pitting on the back. I actually cleaned this up first. Well, chucked it in dirty IPA, then chucked it in hot water to take the supports off, then cleaned it up again twice. But I guess I kind of rushed it. I haven't cleaned it up properly because you've got these dry bits of like old resin on there where I kind of just took it out, washed it off, chucked it in the sun. But this is going to paint up really nice. There's a nice shallow detail level here of fur, which means it will take a nice dry brush if you don't want to put too much effort in. But if you want to paint on it, then actually you're going to have what you need to pick out the high bits. Big fan of this one. Let's grab our size 3 comparison. And I think you'll agree that is a perfect scale for this. He is bigger than the human thrower, fits on a 32mm base. He just looks imposing and mighty and terrifying. He's a werewolf with a chainsaw. All right, on to Dick Cheney, our dwarf. I really like the style of this, and I really like the style of this helmet. Now, you can't quite see on the camera there, but the detail is shallow, but has come up nicely. So actually that's going to be enough for a wash or a dry brush or contrast to pick up that bit of detail there. But everything's come out really nicely. All the braids on the beard and the detail and the dinks and dunks here. So I think we actually saw on the 3D model there was a kind of a bit of like denting on the piece, and it's really, really, really good. This is a very nice model in a very nice style. So along with the Chaos Marauder, if we're going to see a dwarf team with this kind of Iron Hills, I guess, from Lord of the Rings, Helmut style, like Ironbreaker style, it's going to look really, really cool. The proportions are really good, and the sculpting and the character that's been caught is really good. It's not over exaggerated, it's not too cartoony. This is a realistic looking dwarf with a very unrealistic looking chainsaw, which obviously I'm a big fan of. Size wise, he is probably about right for a dwarf. He is a little bit smaller than a human. Obviously he's in that kind of crouching pose. I actually think you could get away with scaling this guy up a little bit. I think he's got kind of halfling vibes. In fact, let's grab a goblin as our size 2 kind of comparison. Alright, he's bigger than the goblin, which is where he probably needs to be as a dwarf. But you know me, I like my models a little bit bigger. This one, however, is good to go. The pre-supports are good. There's not a lot in the way of like support marks. There's a little bit there where I've not cleaned up very well, but actually that's good to go. So the dwarf, scale-wise, is fine. I would probably scale him up to 110% if I was going to use him for a Games Workshop dwarf team, but I think he's good to go. Now we've got a great undead player here. So I really love the rotary design of this chainsaw, and the fact that it's made with bones as well is just fantasy horror, which befits Blood Bowl like basically no other design does. This is a really cool model. We have seen it before. Scale-wise comes out great. Support-wise comes out great. We will do the size 3 scale comparison, and you can see that it's actually in line with the West Cross Abbey team, which is that it is probably a little bit bigger than it needs to be, but this is for a mercenary player. This is for a star player. So in that case, I think that this is probably 110, 115% scale of a human, which means that printed at 100% scale with supports, this one is also good to go. And we've got our 2 halflings to round out the set. I really love the referee. I love that he's got a black eye. You can see he's got all the belt detail there. He's got his red card and he's got his little maul. I'm very sure that is the same art that our friend of the show, Rob from North Wales Carnage Cup, uses. And it's a very cool halfling model. And then you've got this, which is, I think, the star of the show. We've got a halfling smoking a cigar with a colander on his head with this cool knife and fork chainsaw disaster. It's awesome. Like, it is too thick, I think, to be used as a proper chainsaw unless this is kind of like a belt fed. I don't think we need to worry too much about logic when it comes to halflings and chainsaws, given the rest of the set. But there is a ton of character in this tiny model. Now, size-wise, I think it's appropriate that we grab a scale 2 model in the Goblin. And you know what? It's probably right. I think the Games Workshop halflings are a little bit bigger, so maybe 110%. But this one comes pre-supported, printed out. It fits beautifully as a halfling. It definitely represents what you want it to do. And the same is true of the referee there. So I would probably scale it up 110%, but 100% pre-supported works nicely for me. And there you have it, a very cool set. Now, you've got to watch the scaling when it comes to the pre-supports, in that the Croxagore and the Ogre are supposed to be a Saurus and a human. Honestly, though, I like it, the big scale. I think it's pretty cool, but yeah, scale those 2 down to 75%. Everything else is pre-supported really well, scaled really well, sculpted really well. Every one of these star players or mercenaries has just got a ton of character, and it really makes me want to kind of run a tournament or a chainsaw week in your league where actually everybody grab a chainsaw player because you're going to have them on your roster for fun, for free. And, you know, you've got 2 undead versions. And the werewolf guy would be great for Norse. The dwarf guy would be good for most old world leagues and Norse. You've got the Saurus for Amazons and Slan and Lizardman. You've got halflings for most of the teams. And you've got the big barbarian there for all of the chaosy and Norse as well kind of side of it. The only thing you're missing is an elf, and elves don't tend to have chainsaws very often, but you've got it all coloured. And the thing I really love about this is it's a bit of a selection box of models. So Christmas time, the best thing about Christmas, right, it's the selection boxes. They're a couple of quid, there's always a curly whirly in there, and you get a great mix of stuff. And what we've got here, I'm hoping, is MGPix flexing his style a bit, trying a dwarf, trying a chaos warrior, trying a lizardman. And you know what? Tick, tick, tick. Let's have the teams. Come on. In fact, I'm going to drop him a message in a minute and be like, so awesome, when's your Chaos Marauder team coming out? Because I love the style. Watch the scaling, but get printing. These models are great fun, and just use them. I'll just use them and paint them. It doesn't even matter. They're just brilliant. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll be back with more Blood Bowl content soon. Thanks very much for watching. Happy chainsawing. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.